What's up, y'all? Welcome back to the Onyx Reports, Black Masculinist news for the day. Hope you all are well. Please make sure you like, share, subscribe, and join the channel. Support what we're doing. And basically, if you forget, or if you've never been here before, what I basically try to do is promote black male studies and in shifting our perspective about how we see black men, how we experience them, and what goes on with black men. And I'm saying that to black men, as a black man. So my only point is really trying to get us to see ourselves differently and to understand and read what happens to us in a whole different way. Okay. So this is principally what it's about. Now, I report on these kind of things all the time. If you've watched my show at all, since I started on online radio in 2019, and that eventually evolved by January 2020 into YouTube. And what I like to talk about a lot is what goes on with black men, especially in regard to sexual assault, rape, intimate partner violence. And the reason I do is because those stories, even if they do make it to the news, which many instances is rare, they're not talked about in the proper context. They're not given the proper context, and men routinely are dismissed. Because for the most part, the way our imagination has been shaped by popular media is that, if a black man in particular is the aggressor, then we understand that. We have a frame of reference for that. If by chance he's a victim in a dynamic, we don't know how to interpret it. There is no empathy. Most people just kind of glaze over and move on to the next story. And that includes many black men themselves. In fact, some black men will go so far as to blame the black man in the dynamic who may be a victim, or boy for that matter, to blame it, deflect from it, dismiss it, or ignore it altogether, because we ourselves have not really been taught how to empathize for one another. Hell, we don't even often know how to empathize for ourselves. We'll be the first ones to dismiss it as mere victimization. Oh, this is weak, so on and so forth. We do all these kind of things to deflect from dealing with the reality that we're human beings. And human beings can be mistreated. And when it comes to black males, that mistreatment is systemic. It's systemic, and society has profited off of it for generations. We've newly reached a situation, however, newly is a relative thing, but we've reached the point where it's become obvious that there are many black women that have jumped on that train of taking advantage of the systemic exploitation of black men for their own advancement. Right? So, what are we talking about today? Well, this is a story that comes from WLOS.com, titled Police, Alabama woman runs over boyfriend with his own car several times. Now, let's break the title down for a moment. Alabama woman runs over boyfriend. Runs over him. She murdered him. And when I read to you how far this went, even though the story is very glib in how it reports it, runs over is a serious understatement. With his own car, that's almost, like ridiculing him. What does it matter whose car it is? But it's almost as if to say, there's something anyway. So runs over him with his own car, and several times. That part they did get accurate, but really the title should read Alabama woman murders her boyfriend with a car. You know what I mean? Something along those lines. But just like when it comes to sexual assault and rape, you hear different terms like has sex with, had a relationship with, was intimate with, but rarely do you hear women framed in the titling even of these stories as raped a boy, a man, whatever, or murdered, which this article is clearly an indication of. But here we go. Birmingham, Alabama. Authorities in Jefferson County, Alabama, are charging a woman with murder after they say she ran over her longtime boyfriend with his own car several times. The incident happened Saturday night in Birmingham on Pawnee Village Road and was captured on surveillance video, according to the Jefferson County, Alabama Sheriff's Office. The Sheriff's Office says about 10 p.m., 46-year-old Tamika Sims was with the victim when they got into some type of disagreement. Sims got into the victim's vehicle and drove away, apparently dragging the unidentified victim, who WBRC reports was a man in his 60s. The sheriff's office says the video shows Sims returning to the victim, slowly approaching him as he lied on the ground. The video shows Sims drove over the victim multiple times, according to the sheriff's office, and then drove away. But she apparently wasn't done. The sheriff's office says Sims returned to the scene a second time and tried to drive over the victim again. This time she wasn't able to because the victim had moved out of harm's way under a nearby tractor trailer bed. The victim later died. Authorities are now charging Sims with murder. You know, these kind of stories, they've been happening more often than not. More and more. And it's frustrating to watch. Because here's the thing. Whenever I hear women talking about, what men do to them, there's never an instance where there's a rationale that's acceptable. There never is. It doesn't matter if she cheated on him. It doesn't matter if she lied about, the parentage of the children he thought were his. It doesn't matter if she stole from him. Doesn't matter what she does. There's never an acceptable instance that requires that she be run over by a car several times. And I'm with that. I don't have a problem with that. I'm not arguing there should be. What I'm saying, however, is when it comes to a man, a lot of the time you'll hear the first question asked is, what did he do? If you're asking what did he do, you're asking the wrong damn question. Because if he ran over her with his car, you wouldn't be asking what she did. We'd be talking about what's wrong with him, what kind of punishment he deserves, to what extent she didn't deserve to be treated that way. If you have that kind of bifurcated mind state, then you are more than likely a misandrist. And if you don't know what misandry is, let alone anti-black misandry, it simply means the hatred of black men and boys. The hatred of black males, really, right? So that being said, you shouldn't be asking what he did. You should be simply reflecting on it the way you would if he ran her over. There's no excuse that requires that a man be ran over, especially a man in his 60s, after a disagreement. Now, we say it's acceptable in self-defense. At the very least, most people will say, okay, if that need be the case, at least in self-defense. Well, is it acceptable when she pulls a gun on him and he runs over her with his car, or it doesn't matter whose car, fuck it. But is it acceptable then? That's when the conversation kind of goes quiet, right? We don't know how to really answer that. Men will tell you eventually, if we're logical enough, it's, but then the question becomes, yeah, he may be able to defend himself, but why run her over several times? Exactly. If it were in self-defense, do you need to run over the man several times, or did you just need to do what you needed to do to get away? Anyway, I keep saying, and the other reason I keep reporting on these two is not only because I think intimate partner violence against men, black men in particular, kind of goes under the radar, not only because we need to really start to document the hatred of men. In this instance, I'm not necessarily saying that what she did is an example of misandry in and of itself. What I'm saying is the way we treat it is an example of misandry. In that we downplay its importance, and when we do talk about it, we talk about it the wrong way. We dismiss the degree to which he's underplayed. We dismiss how the articles are even titled. We dismiss how to even properly view the situation in lieu of finding new ways to center and prioritize the woman, even when she's the aggressor. That's the misandry I'm talking about. Right? That's precisely what I'm looking at. How we can so comfortably do this. But the third reason that I talk about these or report these cases is during this pandemic and the accompanying economic situation that we're facing. I think these, and I've been saying this since last year, these things are going to increase. The tensions, the stresses, especially in regard to women. The resources that have always been, or I shouldn't say always, but at least for the last couple generations have been so in place to provide them with a floor of sorts that black men don't necessarily benefit from. That's starting to erode. And with that erosion, You finally have some women coming back and being willing to negotiate with men. But in many ways, and you've seen this on, especially if you're watching Kevin Samuels' shows, the last show, I'm going to talk about a couple of interviews he had on there soon. Many of these women don't know how to talk to men anymore. And I've experienced this in direct relation to relationships I've had, relationships with students, and I don't mean intimate relationships, just relationships with students, relationships with women, intimate relationships as well. Many women in this era do not know how to talk to men, let alone how to communicate with men. Many don't understand men, and the basic reason for that is they've never believed they've had to. They've not been raised to. Men are ornaments. Men are white noise in the background. Men are objects to be used for various purposes, right? Whether it has to do with resources, whether it has to do with intellect, whether it has to do with protection, provisioning, whether it has to do with sex, whether it has to do with sperm for reproduction. Men are objectified in many ways, and the only type of objectification we've learned how to talk to, thanks to academic gender studies, is women's sexual objectification. As if that's the only type. And if you talk about men, especially black men's sexual objectification, we've been walking phalluses since slavery. No, but even to black women, let alone to the larger society, nobody knows how to talk about that, which is yet another reason for black male studies. Nobody knows how to talk about it. Or very few, I should say. I don't mean to exaggerate. Nevertheless, this story is representative of a lot of other ones. I find them, people send them to me. Feel free to send me more. But they kind of happen on the underground. And I'm surprised they even make it to the news. But even when they do, we don't pay attention to them. And some people will go so far as to watch a video like that and laugh. Anyway, that's sad. So that man had to die over a disagreement. But that's acceptable, right? Anyway, we got to fight back on this mess. And first thing we have to do is start to see it for what it is. And I hope you'll join me in that process. Support the channel so we can do more of it. Hope you guys are well. Take it easy. Peace.